This is Rabbi Cosgrove, and I think for about 90% of you, I don't need to introduce who I am, though there are some people that are not directly part of the Park Avenue Synagogue community. I'm the rabbi at Park Avenue Synagogue, and it's wonderful to welcome our guests who will be introduced shortly. I want to express my gratitude to David Parker, the Park Avenue Synagogue chair of our Masorti efforts. Thank you, David, for all your hard work. And to you and Ronnie, we wish you a safe and health-filled day and week, and your whole family. I know we have Heidi Schneider, I believe, on the call, who is the chair of Masorti, the board chair of the Masorti Foundation. We thank you for being present for this session, to Gideon, our professional who makes everything possible, Gideon Aronoff, Toda Lecha, thank you so much to you, and I think Yizhar Hess, the CEO of all our efforts, is listening in from Eretz Yisrael, from Medinat Yisrael. Our community was honored to have a pre-recorded message of greetings from Yizhar. If you are part of another synagogue community that is live streaming or able to do that, and Yizhar, you're far away, so you can't kick me under the table, but I just want to encourage other communities to work with Gideon closely, whether it's a pre-recorded, whether it's what we're doing now with a fireside chat. These are really extraordinary opportunities in unreal times to bring the sacred work of Masorti to our communities. But Gideon, you can't kick me under the table either. But I also think that the idea of having dialogues on a Sunday morning with the leadership of Masorti doesn't have to be just a Corona moment. These are sort of coffees, firesides that we can connect conservative Jews, North American Jews with Masorti. Bichlal, it should just be happening. And, it's good that we do it in a moment of crisis, but it doesn't have to be a moment of crisis at all. Just by way of introduction, just a soft reset, both members of the Park Avenue community, but also broader communities. I'll just work from the notes of things I've been saying for the last decade or more, which is when it comes to issues of pluralism, freedom of religious expression in Israel, there is a short game and there is a long game to be played. The short game is that when we see something going on Rosh Chodesh at the Kotel, when there is an issue of lack of access to prayer spaces, a matter of government funding to non-Orthodox Jewish communities, when it is a question of whether rabbis, conversions, weddings of non-Orthodox rabbis are acknowledged, you have to be ready to throw a flag on the field. That's what I call the short game. You have to be able to respond, react, and pivot very quickly when you see something going on that a turn within Israel that counters the very values that we as Am Yisrael, as a broader people of Israel, find in breach of our values. And we do that, and we have done that, and we have wonderful relationships that we're able to activate at a moment of, let's just call it a short game. There's also, and I think this is more important, what I call the long game. The long game is that we have to nurture, support, engage, create relationships with those communities that reflect the values that we hold dear as a North American Jewish community. That's not a reactive pose, that is a long game, because ultimately the success of Masorti, of non-Orthodox Jewish expression in Israel, cannot happen by way of in the moment actions that the state of Israel, the government of Israel, may or may not care about. It has to be a grassroots, native Israeli, from the bottom up, community building effort. I'm talking about synagogues. I'm talking about youth groups. I'm talking about summer camp. I'm talking about adult education. All the things that nurture, cultivate, and build Jewish identity in the long run. This is actually the sacred work of Masorti. This is what we celebrate. Jewish identity building, one soul at a time. And so we might talk a little bit about those crisis short-term moments, but what my focus really is now and always how we can help nurture in a long-term sustained way the sacred work of Masorti each and every day. And so with that as a way to frame our conversation, I want to turn it over to our chair, to David Parker, just so everyone knows what we're going to be doing. I have a few prepared questions that I may or may not follow. And then we're also going to invite everyone to write your own questions in the chat bar of the dialog box on your screen, and I'll crimp from those, and we'll go for the stretch of this session. So without further ado, David Parker.
Thank you, Rabbi Cosgrove. Sophie Fellman Rafolovitz is the national chair of the Masorti movement in Israel. She was born in Guatemala and made Aliyah with her family as a child. She served in the IDF as a drill sergeant and earned her bachelor's degree in occupational therapy from Hebrew University in Jerusalem, and was granted her MED in Jewish education by Oranim College in 2017. Sophie lived in the United States from 2001 to 2005 and 2011 to 2014, when she served as a shlichah, working with Jewish communities on the West Coast and in the Midwest. Sophie also has served as the National Youth Commission Chair and on the executive boards of the Masorti movement in Israel and Marom Olami, Masorti's young adults organization, and she helped to bring a pluralistic prayer group to her own hometown. Since 2014, Sophie has worked in Israel's Ministry of Education as an occupational therapist for children with a range of disabilities and challenges, and supervises occupational therapists in their work. She lives with her husband and 3 children, aged 11 through 16, in Kibbutz Hanaton, where she recently completed 3 years as the pedagogical education director for the kibbutz's supplementary education programs. Rabbi Yerach Meiersdorf is the rabbi of Masorti's Noam movement. He was born in Israel to American parents who had made Aliyah and grew up in the Har Nof neighborhood of Jerusalem in a National Orthodox home. Rabbi Meiersdorf's experiences working with Ethiopian immigrants and learning in the Otniel, an Orthodox Zionist yeshiva, brought him into contact with the diversity of Israeli society. After his army service and traveling in the Far East, Rabbi Meiersdorf obtained a bachelor's degree in education from Herzog College. He then studied at the Schechter Institute in Jerusalem, where he was awarded a master's degree in Jewish education. In 2017, Rabbi Meiersdorf was ordained a Masorti rabbi by the Schechter Rabbinical Seminary. Rabbi Yerach lives in Ein Kerem, Jerusalem, with his wife Nava, also from an Orthodox background and now a Masorti rabbinical student at Schechter. Rabbi Yerach and Nava jointly led the first Kabbalat Shabbat prayer service at the egalitarian Masorti Kotel and founded a Masorti congregation for young adults which, until the pandemic, met in their home. I look forward to an informative discussion of the work Masorti is doing and the challenge it is facing, both pre-pandemic and in the current situation.
Okay. David, thank you so much. We are going to mute everyone other than Sophie and Yerach just now. Yerach, is it okay if I call you Yerach or should I call you Rabbi? All right, well, we have to unmute you, so let's unmute Sophie and Yerach either way.
Yerach is great.
Okay, so why don't we start, let's start pre-pandemic, just by way of introduction. Sophie and Yerach, why don't we go Sophie first here, and we'll switch off. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the sacred work you were doing on January 1st, before all this happened? What you're both leaders of Masorti. You give up your lives as professionals to the movement. Tell us the sorts of programs, efforts that you were engaged in before the world changed.
So I'll thank you, Rabbi Cosgrove. I'll start. It seems so long ago, doesn't it? January 1st seems like a different world altogether. I'll kind of go back to what you started with, what our long-term and our short-term goals are. The biggest difference for me in terms of my work in the movement as a volunteer is the amount of hours on the road, which has reduced significantly, replaced by the number of hours on Zoom. But I think our biggest challenge philosophically, that what we talk about is what's our next step as the movement? How do we reach? We recognize right now in Israel that there's a window of opportunity. The amount of people in the state of Israel who are looking for a different type of Judaism has grown tremendously on the one hand, which is an amazing opportunity. And on the other hand, we have other partners or competitors, depending how we choose to look at it, who are doing amazing work. So one of the biggest questions that we're dealing with is how do we join forces with all the people really, I see this as a work of Zionism, really working hard to change what it means to be religious in Israel and what it means to how you embrace Judaism and how you have opportunities to different things. And at the same time, mark ourselves as a brand of ideas, as a brand of organizations, and work together with our partners so that we can really make a change. And I think that's been our question for a long time, and that's our question currently for this year and following. That's something that we've been very, very busy with. Afterwards, we'll talk about what's been happening since March 15th, which is the day we started being home.
Okay, thank you. Yerach, you run youth for Masorti, the Noam movement. Can you just explain those? Not all American Jews know these words, get jumbled up one to the other. Tell us what you did before March 15th and the sacred work you're committed to.
So first of all, again, thank you so much just for this chat. And it's a bit weird because I think it's been already almost 2 months just in our house. Today was the first day I went out to the office. And usually what I do at my day-to-day life is I travel around the country. That means we have about 18 different branches of Noam. It's the equivalent of USY. We have 1,500 kids. And we have not only the kids, we also have their families. And not all the kids, they meet religious figures. And my job is usually to guide, to help the counselors and to meet up with the children. That means that at least once a week, I travel around the country. It could be a 45-minute car drive, or it could take 3 to 4 hours if I want to drive up north, or if I need to get down to Torah. Just a small settlement at the south of the country. And when I get there, of course, I teach a lot, but most of the time I sit down with counselors and we talk about different issues that are going on with their life. And most of my work is to create or to help them create their own Jewish identity. And it happens mostly for the younger children. I do some games and I do some talks. And with the older congregants, I pretty much, we sit and we write down their Jewish identity. They need to do it themselves, and it's a lot of time just to go over it.
Okay, thank you. So I think we'll stay on you, Yerach, because I think the screen was still on you. So, and then Sophie, you have a minute to prepare, which is, so given what your day job was before March 15th, how did life change for you on March 15th with the coronavirus and the lockdown, what impact did it have on youth and special needs and the communities, educational efforts of Masorti, and how are you responding? So I'm question, but why don't we go one at a time? What changed, and how can you respond?
So I'm leading a community here in our neighborhood, and it may be sound a bit different, but the truth is it's pretty much the same. People just don't feel that they know what's going to happen in the future, and they're afraid of insecurity, of if it's financial, and if it's social, and if it's of course the coronavirus is something that people are afraid that it could hit them. And we found out that at the beginning, when people needed to go into quarantine in Israel, we found out that the families need also something that's familiar. So we've changed all of our structure. We created a virtual youth movement. We decided that we need a branch, or we have 3 different branches today in Noam. One of them is the virtual branch. You could say what we do there is we do activities, our regular activities. We also have something that's called a Moadon Noam. That means a Noam, you could say like a hangout place, a hub, a pub, kind of a hub. And we have every day, we have the children, we have different ages, and they come and they just meet up with their friends. There is also a few days that I teach. That means we divide it by age, and whoever wants to come and just to have a short experience, a Jewish experience. I teach a class, like you can understand. It's not a lot of text learning, but it's always about different stories in Judaism. And we had different, our day-to-day experiences. We had our Pesach hike. It was 3 days. We took the children and we took the children from their parents in front of the computers. It wasn't ideal, but we took them on a walk. They did a virtual walk at Temple Mount in Jerusalem. It was amazing because think about it, that you have kids in high school need to prepare the history and something to guide on Temple Mount itself. And it's amazing for me. Just if that happens, that's good enough. And they also went to the pyramids in Egypt. So they also needed to prepare that. And we're having Lag BaOmer and we're having Shavuot coming up. That's the virtual life that we're having. We have so many activities going on with them. And the next thing that we had is we had all of our counselors needed to call each child in the movement to ask and to see how they're doing. It's a lot of work. And I call also sometimes families, sometimes some of the youth. It gives them so much power, and it's really important for us as well. And the third thing is our Tikkun Olam. We have our Noam kids are volunteering all around the country, and they're doing a lot of work. Some of them are just doing it by phone or by Zoom, and some of them are going out. It depends on the municipality, depends where they can do what they can do. And they go around, they hand out food for people that can't leave their houses or go to do grocery shopping. And a lot of things are pretty much, we changed the structure, but our ideals are still the same thing that we came in before this crisis.
That's amazing. You've totally reinvented yourself, and I'm going to steal some of your ideas. Because we're doing the same thing, but in a different way. But we can all take our kids to the pyramids. So, all right. To follow up, Sophie, what about you? How's life changed?
I'm going to piggyback. I'm going to start with Yerach because I have 3 kids in Noam, and it was for me as a Noam graduate. It was my first opportunity where I got to be in the Noam Pesach Tiyul by not being there, just by being in the kitchen and hearing everything that was going on, including they had to dress up for a hike. They had to bring their water bottles and their hats, and they were checked with it. And the first or second night, Yerach, they actually had a campfire. So they all sat in front of their Zooms with the background of a campfire and sang together and did a lot. It was astounding how they were able to do that. And as a parent and as the chair of the movement, I thought it was unbelievably creative on behalf of Noam. really. So I've said this to Yerach and I've said this to the staff before, but now I'm telling you in front of this whole webinar. So I think it was really unbelievable the way you guys handled it. Rabbi Cosgrove, you asked about special needs. You asked about several things that were happening over here. So virtually, just like yourselves on your side of the ocean, our movement, I think that our movements, one of our movement's strengths is community. And the first thing that happened was that community was taken away from us in a way that you experienced on your side as well. And I think we were thrown into this very quick situation where we had to think how we were going to address community and how we were going to build community in light of what was happening, just like happened on your side, except that being in Israel, you can't be. So for example, we could not be the first people to talk about Zoom on the Seder or Friday night Zooms, because anything that is too progressive or too advanced can immediately backfire in terms of how we're seen by the general public. And what ended up happening over here was that Orthodox Sephardic rabbis beat us to the whole issue of addressing how to approach community, family, Pesach, Shabbat, in a way that not only, but in a way that we weren't able to. And the reason I'm telling you this is because that kind of tells you in a nutshell where we are over here. But it immediately set all of us and our rabbinic community and our financial community, and just in general, talking about how we were going to do this over here and how we could do it, I'm sorry, not financial, PR community, how we were going to do this in a way that addresses the needs, that keeps us true to who we are, and also helps us in terms of how the public views us. And that's a very big dilemma that we were facing throughout this whole time. Our special needs bar and bat mitzvah programs were, the bar and bat mitzvah usually begins, our ceremonies that begin with special needs children were supposed to begin at the end of March and continue through the end of May. Those were all canceled. I'll explain a little bit what that is, but we were actually the first religious organization in Israel to address the issues of children with special needs having a bar or bat mitzvah. Halachically, the Orthodox halacha said that if a person has certain disabilities, they are excluded, they cannot be counted for a minyan, and therefore they could not have a bar and bat mitzvah. And for over 20 years, we've been running a program for children for bar and bat mitzvahs with special needs. This immediately was canceled. However, there were good things that came out of it, surprising good things. For example, one of our...
It was canceled because of a funding crisis, or it was canceled because it's physically impossible to do a special needs bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah, or a little of both?
No, it was a little bit of both, right? The first problem was we couldn't, I work with special needs as my day job. It's very, very hard to do that kind of teaching online, especially with a community with many children who are nonverbal and their families and their communities, but it was also almost impossible to bring them all together, whereas a bar and bat mitzvah for a child who is neurotypical or so doesn't have developmental disabilities, we found very many creative ways, the same as you over here. But with this group of children, it was very difficult. One of the children that I work with is an Orthodox little boy. He is nonverbal, and we've been working, I don't know if everybody's familiar with our Siddur, the Masorti Siddur that's accessible. This is not a good page. Accessible, it has symbols. It's really made for children with all sorts of disabilities. And we also have an app that was launched and it's still on its pilot program. And one of the children I work with is an Orthodox little boy. And I asked, very hesitantly, if I could use this prayer book with him that's egalitarian and it's written by the Masorti movement and the app. And everybody said yes, because there was nothing else available for this child. And in the middle of the coronavirus, I got a text from the mother saying that the app has really shaped their entire experience at home, because he can daven and he can participate with his siblings when they're davening in the morning. So that's kind of a side story of how Corona and how our movement has affected society at large. I'll end with the last biggest biggest change that we've had to deal with is really financial crisis. As of Friday, 25% of Israelis were unemployed and on unpaid leave, including a great deal of our rabbis and our professionals. So a lot of what we've been struggling with in the past month and a half is really how we address this whole financial issue in Israel, both with our professionals who are not being paid, but yet we need our rabbis. You know this as much. We need our rabbis and the congregants need the rabbis. But yet the financial situation has been such that many of them had to take unpaid leave. And the whole non-for-profit sector in Israel has taken a very, very big hit. So those are the financial issues have been very, very difficult for us also in the past 6 weeks.
Right. And just either Sophie or Yerach, just to build on that, on a good day, and again, some people on the webinar right now are very intimately involved in the day-to-day. Some people, this might be their first introduction to Masorti. What are the structural impediments faced by Masorti or Noam? Sophie, you mentioned some of sort of the social, political, there's also the financial. How is your life and in congregational work and youth work different than your Orthodox colleagues in Israel, or different than here in North America?
You mean in general, Rabbi Cosgrove?
Yeah, let's start with general, and then we'll drill down on why the crisis is so acute right now.
So Yerach, you begin, and I'll take your lead.
So I'll just say about the idea of the difference between myself, a Masorti conservative rabbi, and Orthodox rabbis. So my father is an Orthodox rabbi, and pretty much my entire family as well. And I think the biggest difference that we have is the platform itself. That means if I go around and I meet about 100 schools and gap year programs in Israel, at least 100, if not even more than that, I pretty much need to struggle just to get my foot in the door so I could come and I could talk to them about the movement itself. Even though at the last few years, I could see a big difference in the state of Israel. More and more people are calling me if I can come and I could come and talk to them. But it seems like there's a reason why not people are pushing us out of the conversation, of the religious conversation. We're a bit too close to a lot of the values that people truly believe in. This is, again, because I came from the Orthodox world, and the reason or the way I got into the conservative world is because of a paper that my sister read, and she said, this may interest you. And I was studying in a yeshiva at the time, and she said, this may interest you, and I just read it, and that's how I got into the world. That means that the ideas are toxic for a few people. And that's sometimes I sit in a lot of panels with different rabbis, and you can see how it's delegitimized. I can't say that word that well. The idea of liberal Judaism at full. So when we, for example, think that's a lot of our challenge when I go into a school and when I want my staff, my madrichim to go and I want to recruit more children to our youth movement, it takes so much just to get the foot in the door, just for us to say out our message, because some of them are afraid that it's not Judaism, and some of them, they want to keep Judaism in kind of a museum. That means where they say, if I want to do a bar mitzvah, I want it to be the same as they've done it at the last 2,000 years. They just want to keep it the same way. And my day-to-day life is I need to navigate between both of them. And schools in Israel, at least, they get funding, and you get funding if you have certain programs. and the Orthodox rabbinate they have all these programs, so they can come and they can teach and they could do pretty much whatever they want. And we need a fight just to get inside and to spread out our message.
Okay, thank you. Do we want to add to that, or Sophie, do you want anything to build on that?
Yeah, I think there's something interesting that's happened in Israel over the past 70 years, where in the eyes of the general public, if you're a rabbi, you represent values that don't go together with humanistic values in Israeli society. Meaning, if you're a rabbi, you represent values of the opposite of change. I guess your commitment is to continue things the way they were, as Yerach said, museum kind of Judaism. But it also means that you, because you're a representative of what religion means, you will, by definition, be opposed to other ideas that in our minds, and here I'm speaking to our community in the United States, you live this, Jewish and humanistic values side by side. But here, if you're a rabbi, you by definition are assumed, for example, to be against LGBTQ rights, or against, or very nationalistic, militaristic, and against anything that has to do with working towards peace in Israel. And it's become...
Well, that's a very interesting question, because, you know, the religious pluralism is different than sort of the political spectrum of, you know, right, left, two state, one state.
Yeah, absolutely.
Are you suggesting, Sophie, that were it to be that all of, I mean, these questions get very complicated in Israel, right? That you could have someone who's very nationalistic when it, or right-leaning. I'm thinking of Lieberman on you know, one state, two state issues, but insistent on a certain other policy on conversion issues. Do these all, you know, right, that the Russian Olim, or the stranglehold of the chief rabbinate, are there, does it all get very tricky? I mean, if Masorti was right of center politically, would it make it more palatable to a right of center government?
No, I wasn't going there. That's an interesting question. I don't think that the issues with Masorti have to do with that. And also, we're very careful in Israel not to take one stance. When we also talk about political pluralism inside the movement. But if you're an Orthodox rabbi in Israel, there's a set of assumptions that come with it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, keep going.
But when you're a Masorti rabbi in Israel, those assumptions aren't automatically applied to any of our rabbis, both for left or for right political views. And that's something that's a very important stride, a very important change within Israeli society, because there's a great number of people who are disengaged from Judaism because they have come to believe that Judaism is equivalent to non-humanistic values. And I think a big part of our work is introducing the idea of Judaism as something that goes together with humanistic values, whether or not you're a left-wing leaning person or more of a right-wing leaning person, are still our core values insist that, for example, Tikkun Olam, or as Izhar spoke on Friday night, Al Kol Yoshvel Tevel, are us caring for the entire world as opposed to a very small sector. These are humanistic, big liberal ideas. And we insist in Israel, as you do in the United States, that these are Jewish ideas. But I can't stress how difficult that is for many of the Israeli population to grasp, especially on the secular side. And that makes them estranged from Judaism in many ways. So the work of our rabbis here is to introduce Judaism to those members of society who've become estranged, but to say Judaism doesn't mean that you have to change your values. And in fact, in the school where my daughter goes, which is a secular school, there was an issue in the parents' committee where one woman brought up, she was very upset that the school had brought in a Chabad rabbi. This was last year when it could still be done. The school had brought in a Chabad rabbi to make matzah with the kids. And the reason she was so upset is because a Chabad rabbi in a secular school is a threat. to Israelis. It means they're going to try and change everything we believe in and everything that we are, and it's religious coercion. It was a very serious discussion. And what calmed her down was when we said, yes, the Chabad rabbi was there, but also Rabbi Yoav Andy was there for Hanukkah, and he's a Masorti rabbi. And when we said that a Masorti rabbi also came, or a Reform rabbi on a different occasion also came in through the doors, immediately everybody sighed, a sigh of relief, that they knew that it was okay, nobody was going to come and threaten. So then they were able to contain a Chabad rabbi because that Chabad rabbi came side by side with liberal rabbis. And that's a very important part of our work.
Thank you. All right, we're going to go off the board here with no preparation because I see that a rabbinic colleague of mine, Mickey Goldstein, is here, the rabbi of Adat Shalom Emmanuel in Rehovot, who is actually the president of the RA. This is like a celebrity Zoom bombing here. Rabbi Goldstein, say hello so I know I can hear you.
Hi, yes.
Okay, I haven't prepped you, but it was your decision to join this call, not mine, so I don't feel like I'm abusing privilege. But am I right or am I wrong? Were you roommates with Rabbi Witkowski in rabbinical school?
Not roommates, but we studied together. We were chavrutot.
All right, is there anything that the Park Avenue Synagogue community needs to know about our rabbi before we ask you our question?
He's a great person, and he really helped me learn.
Okay, we love him dearly. So, all right, Ben, maybe off screen you can tell us anything we need to know about him. But he's a leader in our community. Rabbi, are you in Rehovot? Is that your kehillah right behind you?
That's my kehillah, but I'm at home. I have various backdrops.
Fake screen.
So this is the one I use when we're doing davening on Zoom.
So tell me, just you're the president of the Rabbinical Assembly, Masorti in Israel.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you give us? This isn't prepped. It's just lovely to see you, and I wish you and your family health. Can you give us a minute? What are our rabbinic colleagues? What are the communities facing right now? We're honored by your presence.
So thank you very much, and I'm really happy to join in. And I didn't intend to take up the time of Rabbi Yerach and Sophie, but I'm going to speak about our rabbis at the moment. There are a number of us, and I'm among them, who have actually taken unpaid leave. We've either been furloughed or we offered our kehillah, as in my case, to furlough ourselves because we know that income is going to be down. We already had some bar mitzvah families who've decided not to do the bar mitzvah this year, or perhaps not even do any bar mitzvah. They're not members, they're people who've come in from the shul. And we're pretty sure that because 25% on average, as Sophie already mentioned, of Israelis are out of work, we're sure that people aren't going to be able to pay their dues. And so, and we also know the Jewish Agency is very, very likely to cut funding and is at the moment suspending any payments to the movement that helps fund my salary and other rabbis' salaries. So that's one area where we're very worried about being able to keep the kehillah going, because we know in Israel, generally, if the kehillah doesn't have a rabbi, it doesn't do too well. But if it does, then it does exponentially better. And I'm not talking about specifically myself, but just the fact that there's somebody there.
Wait, can you say that one more time? I missed that. What was it again?
The kehillah
I'm kidding. Rabbi. Keep going. I'm kidding. Keep going.
Kehillah, oh, right. Good. So, I'm on unpaid leave. Don't tell the National Insurance Institute in Israel, who are now paying me, or hopefully will pay me some form of unemployment pay. Don't tell them, but I'm working perhaps even more hours than I normally would do in regular times. I'm volunteering at my kehillah, although officially I'm not working there. They need us more than ever, the kehillah, to not only to be in contact with our members and to help them get through this difficult period, but to organize new programming, different ways of doing our programming. And our rabbis are really adapting very fast to using new media to working out what their specific kehillah needs. And the different age groups need different things, and they're really able to answer that. And yet If they've not been furloughed, then they're on pay cuts, some of them, a lot of them, and we're really worried what's going to be down the line. And yet, you know, we're at it all the time. We just had a meeting today of all the Kehillah rabbis and thinking of ways forward and using this as an opportunity, even though there are many difficult times
Right.
at the moment.
Right. Thank you, Rabbi. And just to put a fine point on it, just as Sophie and Yerach were mentioning, Rav Yerach, that, you know, everything is tight, but there are some communities, Orthodox communities, that can count on support from the government. Our Masorti communities cannot. And so when the rug is pulled out from any philanthropic giving from Israeli society, from the Jewish Agency, which comes by way of philanthropic dollars, that is, it shakes the very foundation of budgets and otherwise. So we might get more on that. I do want to remind everyone that if you want to ask questions directly, then please just put them in the chat bar privately to me or publicly, and that way I can manage our questions. To any of our presenters, Rav Yerach, Sophie, or Rabbi Goldstein, right now, and Sophie, we were sort of getting to this. I'm just curious. There are two questions that aren't Masorti direct, but I just want to make sure I ask them. Right now, the political moment, sort of the shuffling and reshuffling of the Israeli government, do those conversations affect Masorti? Are those conversations that you know, have, whether it's funding or cultural or political implications for Masorti or not? I'm just curious.
Yeah,
We're all
absolutely.
watching very closely. We understand about, you know, 50% of it. You know, what's going on.
That's more than we understand. Yes, absolutely. That affects very much. So, as you may know, Israel, we don't have separation between religion and state. In fact, as a movement, we went through a very interesting transformation about 10 years ago. When we made Aliyah in the 70s, the Masorti movement, it was very clear that we were advocating for separation of religion and state, just as you do in the United States. But about 15 years ago, we understood that if we do not become if we do not become part of the pie that receives funding as everybody else, then we're not going to be able to exist. We can't exist. The religious structure in Israel is such that you can't self-sustain. You have to find other sources of funding for many reasons. One of the reasons is that religion is publicly funded over here, which means that if you have a neighborhood synagogue, you don't pay membership. Or if you have a Rav, or your neighborhood Rav, that person gets a salary from the government. And youth movements get a salary from the government. All these different things get funding by the government. So we had to switch the way we thought of things and say we have to do everything possible to become part of the pie, both financially, and it's also a political statement. If the government is funding us, then we're counted as a player in the arena. They can't disqualify us from the regular spectrum of things in Israel. And we were quite successful in several different areas. Our biggest success as of earlier this year, or the end of last year, is that we were able to secure funding, a salary for rabbis, non-Orthodox, meaning conservative or reform, they're very specific about that, in different cities. So a city can get a salary or a contribution towards a salary for a neighborhood rabbi, and the neighborhood rabbi can be conservative or reform. This sounds, I don't know how this sounds to American ears, because the whole notion of struggling to get funding from the state for a religious service is a different notion. But for us, it's crucial. And anything that has to do with religion and state and pluralism has a lot to do with how the government is functioning and how the eyes of how much pluralism is viewed as a value, or at least is something that you don't want to mess with. You don't want to mess up. And here the role of the North American community is crucial, because the pressure that the North American community puts on the government has its impact. With this upcoming government, the past government that we had was by far the most religiously extreme government we've ever had in Israel. And that did affect some of the funding that we get from the government for different programs. It also affected a lot of the legal work that we do with changing, for example, the kotel that you may be familiar with, or the issues with conversion or mikvaot. It affects a lot of different things, both financially and legally. This new government that was just formed right now, we don't know how it's going to play out. One of the big game changers that happened last government was that the ultra-Orthodox, who are always a scale tipper, they could be part of the left-wing government or the right-wing government, are now officially part of the right-wing, government, but the right-wing parties have embraced the ultra-Orthodox parties as a rule. And that means that any government that is right-wing will include ultra-Orthodox, anti-pluralist people in their government. So so now this new government is being formed, and the negotiations are being done for the different ministries and who's going to receive what. And we're watching this very, very closely, because it can have immediate effect both on the political, legal side of religious pluralism and on the financial side.
Thank you, Sophie. That was an amazing answer. Yerach, Mickey, anything you want to add to that, or just she said it all? All right. So let me just ask before we open it up, and if anyone has further questions, then now would be the time to email me either privately or publicly in the chat bar. Sophie, you said something earlier. You say you have 3 kids. If I could ask you, and Rav Yerach, are you single? Do you have family? Do you have?
I'm married, but we don't have children.
Okay.
Not yet.
So, all right. I don't mean to be intrusive in a public setting, but
I'm Israeli. That's nothing.
So today was a day. I have nieces and nephews in Israel, and I'm following the conversations about. Some of them are going back to school today. Some of them are not going back to school, even though they've been permitted to go back to school. Can you just tell us what it's like as a parent, or what you're reading in the news? Rabbi Goldstein, I don't know anything about your family, so I don't know if you yourself have kids, but this question of the government saying you can go back, but does that mean you put your kid in school? What are you hearing? What are you experiencing on a human level?
So I don't have kids, but I just spoke to our shul coordinator, and she has 5 kids. And here in Rehovot, they decided that the schools are not ready, because they were basically told Thursday or so to get ready. That means completely cleaning up the schools, and the mayor quite rightly decided here that there's no way it could all be done by today. So on Tuesday, grades 1 to 3 and grades 11 and 12 are going back theoretically. And Vered, our coordinator, she said, I don't know if I want my kids to go back. We've managed so far. Perhaps they'll be better off at home. They've been doing some studying online as well through the schools. So there's a lot of wariness. On the other hand, kids need to have their regular run of the day as well. So it's difficult. And Sophie has kids in school, no?
Yeah. So the grades that went, my district did start school today, and I will say, amazingly prepared. It was unbelievable. My children are not at the ages that went by. The grades that went back were 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade. Basically, the thought over there was allowing parents back into the workforce. Although the preschool side they haven't finalized how that's going to work yet. And 11th and 12th, because they need to prepare for their matriculation tests, and they have their end of school tests coming up. My kids are in between those ranges. However, I work at a school. Special needs have been back already for 10 days. And today, the special needs classes that I work within a school where the first to third graders work. There's a lot of excitement and there's a lot of tension. Both of them, a lot of parents, where my daughter goes, about 75% of the parents did send their children to school, and the preparations were very, very meticulous. They've been cleaning out the school and also how it's going to work. There's 15 students per class, which in Israel is very small. In the special needs classes, up to last week, there were 3 per class. The school buses, our kids are all bused, so the school buses have their very, very structured system. Every child knows how they get on the bus and where they sit, and they're only allowed by the windows. And there was a lot of tension around that. At the same time, it's a Jewish country where there's need for community. So I think there was this tremendous thirst on the side of the children and the teachers to get back and be community. Tony is asking here if the kids are wearing masks. So on the school bus, all the kids need masks. All the kids are required to wear masks from the age of 7. But once they're in the classrooms, if the classroom is well ventilated and everyone's keeping their distance, there's a whole parameter of 2 meters between each student, then they can remove their masks. As soon as they leave the classroom, they have to put their masks on again. So the way, I, as an Israeli, I say we do things, it's always a balagan and it's always very creative. It's always with a lot of emotion, both stressful and...
That should be like the El motto. It's always a balagan and it's always very creative.
Exactly.
By El.
And that's exactly what it was. That my daughter's school, she didn't go yet, she's a 5th grader, but I'm part of the parent committee. They had it decorated with balloons and they had a whole welcoming committee and there was music playing when the kids walked in. And at the same time, there's a lot of tension. There was the WhatsApp groups were buzzing with, do we shower our kids as soon as they come in the door? Do they have to take off their clothes and put on fresh clothes? There's a lot of that. I'm hoping we're all cautiously optimistic that we're getting back to some sort of normal.
Thank you. Rav Yerach, did you have a quick comment? I want to...
Yes, I'll just say that what we found out that, again, most of our staff, about 40% of our staff are not getting paid now because of all the cuts, and they're on leave. And what we're going to do is we're opening up day camps for children that they can't go to school. So our paid staff is going to be pretty much not babysitting, but they're going to help the children in groups of 15. That way we're getting our staff paid and back into Noam again, which is a very interesting way of doing it.
Look, these are all questions we're gonna, please God, right? Please God, these headaches are coming our way soon in America too, about what it means to reopen and physical distancing, whether that's in the workplace and in the pews, in classes, with masks, distant, all these questions. They don't teach us this in rabbinical school, so we're figuring it out. So let me just ask, we only have a couple more minutes. The warm and wonderful thing about this conversation is I look at you, Sophie, and I think, well, there's that you could be a lay leader in our community, and Rav Yerach, you could be running USY in North America, and Rabbi Goldstein, we're colleagues. We go to the same conferences. We are products of the same institutions. I sit across from you on the screen and I say, I could be you and you could be me. We're all one people here. And so I'm wondering, how do we build? How do we always, but especially at this time of crisis, if North American Jews are committed to Masorti and the success of Masorti, give us a little guidance. How can we only have a minute left, but What steps can we take to build on the relationship?
I'll go. So I think what you said is so true. I feel exactly the same way. You know, I feel that we're sitting across the computers, across the ocean, but really we're family in a way that I can't always say about all parts of Israeli. I can, but in a different way. But there's a sense of familiarity, and we really share the same values and the same ideas. And I also sometimes fear that the way things are going, the gap between that, I fear that sometimes if things don't get back on track, that your kids, Rabbi, when they come to Israel, will feel that this is not a place where they can actually feel comfortable because it's becoming too extreme or too fanatic religiously and so forth. And I think that a big part of what should be done and can be done, and I think that actually this coronavirus allows for that, is getting to know each other over, over platform, having this sort of communication, this sort of connection. Also, I think I know that there's a lot, the young generation in the United States is increasingly frustrated with a lot of the things that they see in Israel. And sometimes we have this dilemma where we want to bring in the struggles of Israel, but we still want everybody to love Israel a lot. But sometimes the more we tell the stories, the more younger people especially have trouble loving Israel. And I think one of the things that I think is helpful to know is that you have people on the ground who are working hard to create that Israel of our dreams that we love and to make it that way. And hopefully that notion, if we can get that notion across, that can have a powerful message where we're partners in this.
Thank you. Rabbi Yerach?
So I know this, I don't know how this sounds to you, Sophie or Rabbi Mikey, but most of the days when I wake up in the morning, I feel like I'm Don Quixote. I mean, it's like, it's not always a war going on, but this is what I do. This is from the moment I wake up, and the truth is also when I go to sleep, I think about the conservative movement. I think about our values and our ideals. And if I go all around the country to meet with kids, or at least 7-8 Zoom classes a day that I teach, it helps so much that you know that there are other people that have the same values as yourself. Because the truth is, I would do it by myself, even if I wouldn't know that someone else that I have a support of anyone else. But for me, when I go overseas and when I meet different communities, it is so important just to give me strength to go on to the next day and the next day. And it warms my heart every time I meet up with different Jewish communities around the world. I found out I was in the U.S. I can't believe it, but it was 5 months ago. It feels like it was a few years ago. There are so many people that care about the Jewish people. There's so many people that when I sit down, either for a cup of coffee or just schmooze at the Kiddush table, they generally care about the Jewish people. And I'm so happy just to have a part of that. And to hear you asking to have a Masorti Shabbat just makes me feel good about it. Give me strength for working the rest of my days. So thank you.
Thank you. Rabbi Goldstein, you're not officially part of it, but I want to give you the kavod of, is there a word that you want to share?
Yeah, so I besides the obvious philanthropy that we will need during the year, that goes without saying, and we thank you. That I'm sure many of you are supporters of Masorti already. But what I found amazing is that I can now join in many more activities that my colleagues and the shuls that I'm connected to in the States or in Europe are doing, because we've all moved to Zoom and live streaming in these last few weeks. So I was watching services from Pasadena Jewish Temple and Center, which is a shul that my shul is connected to out in Pasadena. Normally I would never watch their services, because how could I? But
because you're watching Park Avenue services.
Well, I watched the one. I can't watch everybody's. There's enough time difference I could do both. Although I do watch some of your online stuff that you have on YouTube and whatever to get new tunes from your wonderful Chazan. But it's a chance for us to connect. I've had people drop into our Kabbalat Shabbat from abroad, perhaps because they've had a family connection to my shul, but they've joined in our Kabbalat Shabbat, and we can join in, and most of our classes are going to be in Hebrew, but we have some stuff in English, or other kilot have in English, so we can actually really take part together in activities in a way that we never were able to beforehand, and that's a great way to connect.
Okay. Well, with that thought in mind, Rav Yerach, if you are cordially invited, I want to watch your expression very carefully right now. At 5 o'clock today, which is midnight your time, we have our teen weekly get together. So you are cordially invited to give an update from Masorti to our teens, to our Zoom call there. Though you might kill me for keeping you up late at night.
My wife will have a bit of an issue with that. Yeah.
All right, we'll talk about that after the call. I do want to thank Sophie and Rav Yerach for giving of their time and wisdom. I want to thank David Parker for making all of this possible. Gideon Aronoff for leading the charge. I see that we have Heidi Schneider, the head of the whole foundation, as well as Tony Bickart, who is the treasurer. Tony would want me to say what I'm about to say, but I'm going to say it anyway, which is that we have had this extraordinary weekend of Masorti Shabbat. We were honored by Yizhar's presentation to our community, pre-recorded on Friday night. And then on Shabbos, we had a special pre-recorded presentation from the teens in our community who celebrated at their B'nai Mitzvah at the Kotel with the Sefer Torah donated by Park Avenue Synagogue at the Egalitarian Kotel. Right now, we've had this discussion, which I think we'll all agree has enlightened and engaged and enthused us on the sacred work of Masorti. And then there's going to be an email. There's going to be an email that's going to be included to the entire community, which is going to give you the contact links of Masorti, and it's going to signal to you how to help support the work of Masorti. And I hope that everyone can leave this community this weekend energized and able to do their part in these difficult times to help the sacred work of Masorti. So that's going to be in the weekly email as well. With that, Sophie, Rav Yerach, thank you so much for giving of your time and wisdom, not just today, but every day to Masorti. We thank you and we wish you, where you are, a good evening, and to everyone on the call, a good, healthy day for you and your loved ones. Toda rabba lachem, toda rabba. Have a good day, everyone.